Oh my god, the tool I just tested is mind-blowing. Really, I want you to hear it and let me know what you think. The other day I did a conference for a French client and I wanted to share it with you guys just because this topic is awesome. It's about how to develop critical thinking at the age of AI, and I was talking about the fact that I was working on that summary to a friend, and he told me about a new tool that Google developed where you give it some information. There I just gave one Google Doc with my transcript of my conference, and what it did is that it created a whole podcast with two AIs commenting on my conference. It's mind-blowing. It's really mind-blowing. And the content is super interesting. They really took the main topics. Of course, it's not 1 hour conference, so some things are missing, but it's really super interesting, key takeaways in a super engaging way because you have two people commenting on it. So incredible. It really, really raises questions about what are truly human creativity skills and what AI can do. So raises lots of questions. Let me know what you think.
Okay, so you know how much we love a good deep dive, right? And you all sent in some seriously interesting notes this week from that conference on critical thinking and AI.
Yeah,
So much good stuff there.
absolutely fascinating.
It feels like every day there's a new headline about AI.
Right.
Like, is it going to take over the world? Should we be worried?
Well, and even without the whole robot appraising scenario,
Okay, true.
it's a lot to wrap our heads around.
It really is. It's like our brains are still playing catch up with the digital age.
And the information overload.
Exactly. And this conference, actually, one of the speakers, a philosopher who works with the European Commission on AI, no less,
Okay.
they dove straight into this really cool example about how our brains, like the way they're wired, can sometimes trip us up. It's called the Simpson paradox.
The Simpson paradox, I've heard of that. Isn't that about statistics being misleading?
Exactly. It shows how easy it is to draw the wrong conclusion if you're only looking at part of the picture.
Which, let's be real, is most of the time right, with
Yeah.
so much information out there.
Totally. So they use this example about COVID vaccination rates.
Okay.
And it's something that everyone can relate to because we've all been living through this for the past few years.
Right. Yeah.
So imagine you're looking at data from, say, 1 million people,
Okay.
and out of those people, 100 of them end up in intensive care.
Okay.
Now, when you look at the ICU patients, you see that 63 of them weren't vaccinated and 37 were vaccinated. So at first glance, you might think, oh, wow, the vaccines aren't working. Look at how many vaccinated people got really sick.
Right. It seems like the obvious takeaway.
Right, like maybe the vaccine is even making things worse.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. When you zoom out and you look at the whole picture, you realize that 90% of that 1 million people were actually vaccinated.
Oh.
So suddenly those numbers look totally different.
So it's not that the vaccine is making things worse, it's that more people were vaccinated overall, so proportionally.
Exactly. It's like if, let's say, almost everyone decided to wear a blue hat on a sunny day.
Okay.
And a few people wore red hats.
Yeah.
And then you had, like, a handful of people who got sunburn. And most of them were wearing blue hats just because, well, most people were wearing blue hats.
Right. Doesn't mean the blue hats are causing the sunburn.
Exactly. It's about the bigger picture, the context.
That's fascinating.
And the thing is, this whole Simpson paradox, it shows how our intuition can lead us astray, especially when we don't have all the facts.
And we rarely have all the facts, do we?
Never. And what's even more interesting is how this very human tendency to jump to conclusions can actually get passed on to AI.
Oh, interesting.
Because AI systems, they learn from the data we feed them.
Right, right.
So if the data itself is biased or if it's reflecting some kind of existing bias, the AI is going to pick up on that.
It'll inherit our biases.
Exactly. And there was the speaker at the conference brought up this kind of unsettling example of how this played out at Amazon.
Oh, yeah, with the recruitment tool.
Yes. They were trying to automate their hiring process.
Ambitious.
So they wanted to create an AI that could sort through all these resumes.
Make their lives easier.
Right, and find, like, the best candidates for these really technical jobs.
Makes sense.
But there was a problem. The AI was trained on data from their previous hires.
I'm sensing a but coming.
And in the tech industry, historically, there have been way more men than women.
Of course, that's still an ongoing issue.
So the AI, it started to learn that resumes with words like female on them, even if it was just mentioning something like a women's chess club.
No way.
Yeah, it started to flag those resumes as less desirable.
Wow. So even if you try to make it blind to gender, it finds these weird workarounds?
Exactly. It's like the AI found this sneaky backdoor to discriminate.
That's really concerning.
And in the end, Amazon actually had to scrap the whole thing because it was so riddled with these hidden biases.
It really makes you think. We talk about AI being objective,
Mm-hmm.
but it's only as objective as the information it's given.
And the humans who are programming it.
It's a sobering thought.
It really is. And it makes you wonder where else these biases might be lurking, especially when it comes to AI systems that are already out there making decisions that affect our lives.
Exactly. Decisions that have real-world consequences.
Exactly. And, the speaker at the conference, they actually dug into this even further. They talked about how AI bias isn't just some hypothetical problem for the future. It's something that's already happening right now. And they gave some pretty shocking examples.
Like what?
Yeah.
Yeah, like some really unsettling stuff like this software called Compass.
Compass. What's that?
So it's this program that's used in the U.S. justice system.
Okay.
And basically, it's used to try to predict how likely someone is to commit another crime.
Wait, really? Like judges actually use this?
Yeah, they use it for all sorts of things,
Like what?
like deciding on parole or sentencing,
Wow.
even whether someone gets bail.
No way.
Yeah, it's kind of a big deal.
That's a huge responsibility for an algorithm. How does it even work?
So they feed it a bunch of data about the person,
Okay.
like their criminal history, their age, whether they have a job, stuff like that.
Okay.
And based on all that, it spits out a risk score.
So like low risk, high risk.
Exactly.
I mean, I guess that makes sense on the surface.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty standard risk assessment tool.
Right.
But-
There's always a but.
Right.
So what's the problem with it?
Well, studies have shown that Compass is actually racially biased.
You're kidding. How is that even possible?
It all comes back to the data.
But I thought these algorithms were supposed to be objective, Like they just look at the numbers.
That's the thing. They do only look at the numbers, but those numbers can reflect existing biases.
So you're saying even if the algorithm itself, like the actual code, isn't trying to be racist,
Right.
it can still perpetuate racism because of the data it's trained on.
Exactly. And in the case of Compass, the data reflects the biases that already exist within the U.S. justice system.
Oh, wow. So it's like a vicious cycle.
Exactly. It's like baking a cake with spoiled milk. You can try to dress it up, but it's still going to taste off.
And the crazy thing is, they're still using Compass in courthouses.
Yeah, despite all of these known flaws.
Wow. It makes you wonder, right? Like, if an algorithm that's supposed to be used for something as serious as the justice system can be that messed up, what does that mean for other areas where we're using AI?
Well, that's the million-dollar question.
Right.
And the speaker at the conference, they actually brought up this other example from the world of policing,
Oh, okay.
this software called Predpol.
Predpol. What is that?
So imagine you're a city,
Okay.
and you're trying to figure out where to deploy your police resources.
Okay.
Right. So you want to make sure you've got officers where they're needed most.
Yeah.
So what if you had this algorithm that could analyze all the crime data
Mm-hmm.
and tell you where crimes are most likely to happen, kind of predict the future?
Okay. I mean, I can see how that would be helpful in theory.
Right. Like, it sounds good on paper, use your resources efficiently, prevent crime.
Right. So what's the catch?
The problem is that it can create this really dangerous feedback loop.
What do you mean?
Okay, let's say the algorithm looks at the data
Mm.
and it decides that this one particular neighborhood is a little bit more high crime than the others.
Okay.
Maybe just by a tiny bit, like one or two more incidents.
Okay.
So naturally, they send more police to that neighborhood, right?
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
But here's the thing. When you have more police in an area,
Yeah.
you're going to have more arrests, even if it's just for really minor stuff, right?
Wait.
And guess what? All that data about those arrests,
Yeah.
it gets fed right back into the algorithm.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
And suddenly the algorithm's like, see, I told you that neighborhood was high crime. Look at all those arrests.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly.
It's creating the problem it's supposed to be solving.
And that's exactly what happened with Predpol.
Really? What happened?
They ended up having to discontinue it because after a while, it became clear that it was actually making things worse. especially for communities of color.
Wow. So what do we do? How do we fix this?
Well, sometimes recognizing that the algorithm is inherently flawed and abandoning it is the best course of action.
You're saying we need to know when to hit the brakes.
Exactly. And that's a really tough decision, right? Because on one hand, you've got this technology that promises to be more efficient, more objective.
Right, it's tempting.
But on the other hand, we have to ask ourselves, at what cost?
It's like we're trying to outsmart ourselves, you know? We create these systems to eliminate human error, but then we end up replicating and even amplifying our own biases.
It's a real catch-22.
And it makes you wonder, like, where does human judgment even fit into all of this?
Right. Because it's easy to say, oh, the algorithm is biased, we need to fix it.
Right.
But how do you even begin to untangle something like that?
It's like, where do you even start?
Right. And the speaker at this conference, they actually had this really interesting framework for thinking about all of this.
Okay, I like a good framework. Lay it on me.
They compared it to choosing coffee.
Choosing coffee. What does choosing coffee have to do with artificial intelligence and ethics and all this?
Okay, so think about it this way. When you're choosing coffee, you don't just like grab the first bag you see.
Well, sometimes I do, if I'm being honest, but I get what you're saying.
Okay, but ideally, you might look at the different options.
Right.
The roasts, the origins, you might even smell them.
Sure, sure.
Right, you're exploring the possibilities before you make a decision.
Okay, and how does this relate to AI?
It's about the process of forming an opinion. So just like with the coffee, you want to start by exploring different perspectives on the technology.
So, like, read different articles.
Yeah, read articles, talk to people who have different viewpoints.
Don't just stay in my little echo chamber.
Exactly. Because if you're only hearing one side of the story, you're not really thinking critically, are you?
True, true. So I've had my coffee tasting. I've explored the options. What's next?
Now it's time to analyze.
Okay.
So you've gathered all this information. Now you have to actually look at it critically.
Put on my thinking cap.
Right. Question everything.
Everything.
Well, maybe not everything, but you know what I mean. Like who's saying what and why. What are their motivations? Are there any potential biases in what they're saying?
So, like, are they trying to sell me something? Are they funded by someone who has a vested interest in this technology?
Exactly. Or what about your own biases?
Oh, good point. I'm definitely biased.
We all are. It's human nature. But being aware of those biases, that's a big part of critical thinking.
Okay, so I've explored the options, I've analyzed the arguments, I've acknowledged my own biases. What's next?
Now it's time for the most important step, filtering everything you've learned through your own values.
So this is where I decide if I'm a latte person or an espresso person.
Right. But instead of coffee preferences, it's about your core values, the things that are most important to you.
So, like, is it fairness or privacy, or maybe it's something else entirely?
Exactly. And then you use those values as a guide to help you navigate these really complicated issues.
Because technology, especially AI, it's not just about the how, it's about the why.
Exactly. And ultimately, it's about making conscious, informed choices that are aligned with your own ethics.
Well, I have to say, this has been a real eye-opener.
It's a lot to think about.
It really is.
Yeah.
We've gone from biased brains to biased algorithms to ethical coffee choices.
It's all connected.
It really is. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you would want our listeners to take away from all of this?
I would say, don't be afraid to ask tough questions about the technology, about the data, about the people who are creating it.
Don't just accept things at face value.
Exactly. The future of AI, it's not predetermined. It's being shaped by the choices we make every day.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining me on this incredibly thought-provoking deep dive. Next time.